Hello, hello, hello. This is another episode of on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining me and thank you for the support you've given me for the last couple of videos. I really do appreciate you taking your time to watch what I'm trying to create here. Today I'm going to talk about making the decision and everything that follows through. I did mention that in 2021, I made the decision to stop drinking alcohol. I joined AA. Part of this story for many alcoholics or many addicts in any field is that you have the decision, you have your first day, and then you have everything that comes after. Now that seems obvious. Time is linear. But what do I mean when I say that there's everything that comes after? In my process, in my experience, I realized that chaos lives in silence. And what do I mean by this? What I mean is that once you let go of the substance, the behavior, the habit, you're left with a deep silence. And in that silence is chaos. And that chaos will demand a return to what was always known. In my case, it was alcohol. So the silence would let me, be alone with my thoughts because the thoughts will demand a return to what is common. And what was common to me was alcohol. Alcohol delivered what it promised. It always did. Not once did it disappoint me. But the silence makes no promises. The silence makes no vows. The silence makes no oaths. The silence just asks you to be. And there's nothing more difficult for a man, especially in 2026, than to simply be. I don't know how one can do that nowadays. So what happens the day after you make the decision or the day after you stop indulging in the habit, the behavior, the pattern? The day after, you are forced to face yourself. And to take this from the abstract to the day-to-day, what I mean is this. If you were like me and you depended on alcohol for most days of your life, of your adult life in my case, the day after I quit, the first thing I need to ask myself is, what will I do with all of this empty space? What am I going to do? Because before, the empty space meant time to drink. Having a free block of time meant I now have time to drink. So what will I do with that time? Since I was a child, since I was 7 years old, I had enjoyed the creative endeavor of writing. But since I started drinking, I had pretty much stopped writing. I did write here and there, but I never really committed. So one of the things I did on the day after, well, not immediately after, but this is one of the things that held me in place, was to give myself back to writing. Going back to the thing that held me together when silence was all that I had. So, you see, people who are not addicts or people who are not trying to make an endeavor to stop whatever is letting them down, they simply celebrate the decision. So if I tell my wife or my mother or my friends, if I say, you know what, babe, mom, dad, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm done. I'm done. Never again. They'll clap. They'll celebrate. They'll even, you know what, Oscar, here is your last glass. Then never again. Because as far as they're concerned, my decision to quit is the obvious decision. Why, Oscar? Why didn't you think about this before? But I did. And I tried. And I failed. Because the chaos that came with the silence was too much for me to bear. Maybe I'm weak. Yes, I am weak. I was weak. But here's the thing. They don't understand that some people just need something in the space. I don't know what to say about it. Maybe for someone like me, the chaos in the silence was just too loud. So I needed something to silence the chaos. And for most of my adult life, up until 2021, it was alcohol. Once I quit alcohol, I had to find something else. I've said I went back to writing. Writing wasn't enough. It wasn't. Prior to drinking, I was also into physical fitness. I had to go back to that again. And to this day, I use the gym or even just going for long walks or a run as a way to silence the internal chaos. I was having this discussion with my brother. And my brother asked me, Oscar, what is your biggest aspiration in life? And I told him, my biggest aspiration is to be okay with myself. Because that's very hard. We all have insecurities. And if you're like me, you might spend some time pretending you don't have any. Even though those insecurities are the driving force beyond most of what I do. I work hard in business, or rather I try to work hard in business because I am insecure about my financial status. I work hard on my body because I was once really insecure about my weight. All of these insecurities drive me, but what does that say about me? That one of my largest driving forces in life is insecurity. One might say, I've been fortunate enough to turn this negative energy into something positive. Yes, at some point in time, my social insecurities made me drink in order to become social. Now, I'm part of a group that understands my situation, who I am, and I'm able to be purely, honestly social with them without being influenced or driven by insecurity. Something negative has become something positive. My desire, my insecurity about my financial status has put me in a place where I'm actually offering something of value to people. I'm worrying about money. I end up providing a service to people that gets me money. I'm worried about my weight. I end up doing things that keep me healthy enough to play with my kids. Insecurities can be turned into positive energy. But before you get there, you need your day one. You need your day one. And then you need day two. What happens on day two? What happens after they celebrate your decision? Are you done? Do you go back to day zero? Because people do that. I made the decision. That's enough, right? My first sponsor told me this, really gave me an interesting analogy. And he says, Oscar, there are 3 frogs on a log. And one of the frogs decides to jump into the water. how many frogs are left on the log? And I said, 2 frogs. And he said, no, there are 3. What do you mean that there are 3? But one jumped. And he said, no, Oscar. One decided to jump. No frog has jumped yet. So some people make the decision on day 1. And once they are celebrated for their decision, they go back to day 0. And they never get a chance to understand this and to find what exists after this. Dear viewers, thank you so much for listening. I hope there is some value in what I'm trying to create, and I hope you do understand what I'm trying to say. And if you don't, please comment, and I don't mind taking some time to explain. Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.